here today with Jon Libman from Fairway Mortgage. Jon, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Well, so obviously we've worked together in the past for a couple years now.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I wanted to bring you in here and kind of talk to you today, something that I had touched upon in one of my previous videos was about working with first-time home buyers. Yeah. And of course, you know, it's so hard right now in this market for any buyers, but especially the extra layer of a first-time home buyer that really has no idea what they're doing. They've never done this before. Yeah. And I always try to stress to them, and I feel like you can also do a good job of stressing the point that having a local, knowledgeable lender is going to make the process a million times easier.
Oh, I 100% agree. I mean, knowing the agents involved. So sometimes an offer is being submitted and we can actually make a call to the listing agent because we have familiarity with them.
Right.
That really makes a big difference too. And you mentioned about education. I think that's the biggest thing right now that will to differentiate any buyer, but especially on a first-time scenario.
Right.
I mean, if you've been bought in the last 5 years, you kind of are a first-time home buyer because this market's brand new.
That's
in the last,
true too.
right? In the last 2 years. But we are making very fast decisions. Probably the largest decision they've ever made financially in their life at that point, right? First-time home buyer. So the more educated we can just teach them about the programs, their comfort level. I always use the word guardrails on their monthly payments, having all their documentation together, organized. They're going to be able to make a faster, educated decision. Yeah. Because with it being so competitive, we have to make fast decisions, right? And if they've played out all these scenarios already that prior weekend, we're ready to rock. Yeah. You know, and I think that really makes a difference.
And like you said, even with like the guardrails, I love that because I have a buyer recently that was pre-approved for way more than they were comfortable buying and or comfortable of handling that mortgage for. And they're out there looking at properties and they're ready to submit offers. And it wasn't until the light bulb went off and they were like, well, do you know how much I'm going to be paying monthly for this house? And I was like, and of course this buyer unfortunately was not working with you. So I was kind of like their step-in lender. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, I don't think they've even factored into like, okay, well, I'm pre-approved with 400,000, but am I comfortable carrying a mortgage for 400,000? And they weren't.
It's true. It's very misleading, especially if you're not working with someone that's a local trusted individual, like you pass out those names. Right. Because we can qualify on gross income, not take home. We don't account for all monthly debts. You know, I have 3 little children, right? If I'm paying daycare, it doesn't count as a debt unless you're doing a VA loan. So if I'm qualifying somebody and they're really spending $1,000 a month on daycare, we're not accounting for this, right?
That's a huge bill.
There's a huge thing. So there's a budget with a first-time home buyer that we really always like to go over, as well as a qualification. So usually when you ever get a letter from me, they're on the email, you're on the email, and it's, hey guys, this is your comfort zone. Right. You do have the ability to go higher if you'd like, but based on everything we went over, that comfort zone hit their guardrail, right? It's kind of right. And then we know, give or take, an average is usually about $50 or so per 10 grand, right? So if they want to go up or down, and a lot of times the taxes per town really dictate a lot of this too.
Oh yeah, that's
you know,
very
from monthly
true.
standpoints.
Yeah. But no, and even with another recent buyer of mine, you know, texting me if they should, you know, buy furniture and what can they buy? Can they use their cash to buy it? What can they do? What shouldn't they do? And I'm like, well, I know for sure don't open up any new credit right now unless you just want to like ruin this.
Yep, exactly.
But like at the same time, I'm like, and they start this conversation or this like text to me as being like, I know you're not my lender, but my lender doesn't get back to me, or I haven't heard from my lender. Yeah. So I'm at the furniture store right now and I'm about to pull the trigger. What do I do? And it's like, no, stop. Like, yes, I need to work with people that are communicating with my client and explaining those things and that are available to do that. I mean, I get it. You can't answer the phone 24/7, but you know, it shouldn't take days to get back.
Yes, you should be available to everybody. And that's, you know, we can all go online and find random companies that do mortgages. We can, but there's a reason they're just online companies. They don't have boots on the ground in the area and they don't understand that urgency. They might just be working on buying leads off systems, right? Yeah. And we're building it off of because we're an extension of you. We need to make that process smooth for them, right? On top of that, they should build a relationship with everyone on their home buying team, right? The attorneys, the real estate agents, the mortgage people, the insurance people, right? This is who's going to help guide them. Right. If they can't get a hold of one of these people that is trying to guide them, I think they need to change the ship a little bit. You know?
Yeah. No, that's very true.
No, for sure. But educate, it's all part of the education right there, right? If you're already feeling that there's difficulty getting a hold of somebody, well, how's it going to be when you're actually under agreement, trying to close on time? If this person's not getting back, right? There's a blend of all of that for sure.
Yeah. Time is money.
Yes.
And sellers are, especially right now, I mean, they could just pick any backup cash offer if they think that something's not going well with the mortgage and still close in maybe even shorter time frames. So we need to be on top of it.
I mean, with their education, they actually have a huge leg up on a lot of people right now. They're not contingent on a home sale. Right. So that is the biggest issue right now. Anyone that's trying to sell a home, I keep getting the call. Can we remove the contingency of a home sale? Can we remove it? Can we remove it? It just keeps getting asked. Right. And
we're trying and
we're doing a science project behind the scenes to show them different avenues of what would that be the case. Every first-time homebuyer does not have a home to sell.
True.
There's a huge advantage on everyone. So if they can make the right offer, get educated by the agent they're working with, they have a leg up already on somebody.
Yeah. Some of my best offers that have come in on my listings have come from first-time home buyers. They might not have even been the highest purchase price, but it was the fact that they were living at home or they had a month-to-month lease.
Flexibility,
and
right?
We can do a rent back for a month or two if needed. We can close in 4 months and we're fine with that. So that is a good point that you bring up, that first-time home buyers are really in that position to have that availability.
I mean, that seller may need to sell their house, right? Well, that first-time home buyer goes, sure, I'll wait at my parents' house while you're doing this, right? And now that seller gets ample time to get their home on the market, do everything, and then actually ideally have their contingency kind of almost done because that person's already ready to close. Yeah. Huge advantages there. But it's all about the education of it.
Absolutely.
Yep, definitely. If you're speaking to a loan officer, one, it's nice to be local because you can physically reach out and touch that person, right? You can meet them face to face. You can drop off paperwork at their office. We have multiple offices throughout the area, so it's always easy to do that, right? And we're readily available. We have an entire team, for texting, email, call, we're all available, right? And most of our decisions get made when? 5 to 9 o'clock at night during the week, on the weekends, right? When you're dealing with
outside of their schedule.
Exactly. And we usually have a big advantage over your local bank type of companies because of that availability, right? There are obviously great programs with banks, so I don't want to say there are not, and some people have more of a comfort level with their local community bank, no problem. Right. But overall, as long as you're dealing with reputable companies, you're going to find everybody's within usually about 1/8 on the rate, right? All the closing costs are relatively the same. So you just develop who you have your comfort level with, building that team, Yeah,
no, absolutely.
Yeah. Have your documentation ready. What's tough is this. It's not required to have this paperwork in order to issue a letter, okay? So if you go to an online company and you fill out just this generic online application, they take your word for everything. Right. But maybe the guideline doesn't work according to your income that you plugged in. And that's why it's so important that ideally we like to review your paperwork so we just know your information is accurate that you're giving us. Right? Are we really reviewing it correctly? Someone that's self-employed, maybe they've only been self-employed 6 months, they plugged in their income and they thought they were good to go because they got a letter, but nothing was actually ever verified. So as a first-time home buyer, educating again, right? Knowing you're really playing with the real numbers, Also discussing what if a gift is coming from mom and dad. It's really common on the first-time home buyer.
Oh, absolutely.
There's also, or any relative at that. The other part too is a lot of people potentially borrow against their retirement. How does that process work? There's different scenarios where funds are needed for a transaction, and getting all that information, even if you're a couple months away from being in that spot, even if you're in a lease agreement till August, start educating yourself now so we can prepare for that moment. Maybe it's something we need to repair on your credit.
Oh yeah, because the last thing you want to do is back out some wrong mistake that you made or some huge deposit that was done incorrectly.
Exactly. Most first-time home buyers are putting down anywhere between 3 to 5%, right? There's a chunk that's putting down 0 to 3% as well. But I would say the most common that we see is probably 3 to 5%. It's okay to have mortgage insurance or PMI or private mortgage insurance, right? A lot of times the old stigma is you got to have 20% down. You don't need to have that, okay? But if you're not comfortable with the payment, that's part of what we'll be talking about. And maybe you are going to wait 6 months because you want to pay a car loan off. Maybe you are going to wait 6 months because you're going to pay a credit card off. Because that's what all of this process is. Just because you're talking to a lender day one does not mean you have to buy a house tomorrow. Right. Just kind of getting that roadmap ready.
Yeah, to set yourself up for whether you can do it now or sometimes you can't do it right away. So you need that time to kind of work on things.
Exactly.
And I see so many people that say oh, well, I don't think I'm ready yet. I'm just going to pay off all my credit cards. And I'm like, no. I think you should talk to one of my lenders first. And, that may not be the best thing to do, is just by paying off every single card. There could be, I've learned just from working with you that there are better ways to allocate money towards debt that could push you into.
Exactly. And maybe they qualify with the debt, but they don't have a down payment. So maybe it's better served to keep that funds for their down payment.
Right.
Why and then come up with a plan for everything else. But it's just all about discussing all those different options so they can make the right decision and quickly, because that's how the market is.
And especially now, when I feel like when I first started back in 2017, and again, especially with first-time home buyers, actually really most buyers at that point, asking for closing costs was kind of a norm. That
was a norm.
That wasn't
2.5 years ago. That was like on every loan.
That was just like, oh, okay, yeah. Well, and then, sometimes maybe you offer a little bit more than the asking price to make up for that, so the seller still nets what they want. But now it's like there's the stigma behind the closing costs. So like you were saying, it might be better for them to not pay off all this debt. They may still qualify for a $300,000 home and not have to ask for closing costs because they still have that cash to use.
Exactly. And when we're talking about the credit that you're referencing, so if like the average person can, right, what happens is you're ending up rolling in a portion of a credit that's on paper that will go towards those closing costs and prepaids. That's really what you're referencing, right? The other way that can happen is you can roll it in as a lender credit, right? So potentially you're taking a higher than market interest rate and we're absorbing it on our end and giving a credit as a lender credit. So there's two different options there, but over the last 2.5 years, a lot of that's been removed in a lot of transactions to win offers. That's really what it is. Are they still there? Do we see them 100%?
Oh yeah.
And
they have worked. And even kind of going back to earlier when you were talking about different programs, there are still houses out there that I just had a VA buyer that, it worked. The house had been on the market for a couple weeks and it still worked. We couldn't compete with all of these homes that had 40 plus offers, 20 plus offers. We weren't competing with those ones, but there are still other options out there to look for. And we were able to get them the VA loan, even with closing cost credits wrapped in. And it's still, there's still options out there. There's inventory if you look hard enough.
And we're actually seeing a big uptick in a lot of the government loans and state loans actually getting accepted. When we're looking at our data from even a couple months ago. And part of that is because those buyers probably have been losing out on offers for the last 2 years, and they're finally it's now their time, right? And I think they're coming in. The other thing too is, someone that might be listening or watching this, they might already have a pre-approval out there, and they might have done this a couple months ago. If you're a lender and you have not connected in the last 2 months, you better connect with them.
Yeah.
Rates have climbed probably at least a percentage point since your last conversation. If this was back in December or January, you may have maxed yourself out on that qualification and you don't actually qualify at that number anymore. Okay. And you might not be comfortable at that monthly payment if you do qualify at that number. Right. So there's a big piece of that puzzle. Make sure you're constantly in connection. And if you haven't had any communication, there's been a lack of it, maybe reach out to people like ourselves that, are trusted sources.
Better to find that out ahead of time than after you get your offer accepted on your dream home and find out
you've spent on a home inspection, you're finally seeing all the numbers. Exactly. And that's really important, just about educating that process.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other part of this is, we talk about education. What are you doing with these first-time home buyers? Because you've been doing this a long time as well. You're seeing the differential in the market. How are you sitting with and talking and educating these buyers, or even submitting offers? There's definitely different strategies here.
Absolutely. First, I try to sit down with them just one-on-one before we even start looking at houses, doing an MLS search, anything, just like a sit down and to just kind of go over everything. And, I do a quick timeline of what the buying process is, but I try to make sure that they know that they don't have to memorize this. They don't have to just because I explained it the first time, it's like, well, I told you that day one, you should know that we're in home inspection period. I'm there to answer their questions along the way. And then of course, obviously setting them up with good referrals when it comes to lenders, home inspectors, things like that. That's all things we discuss kind of on the front end of the
quarterbacking.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And after we kind of get through that process, and get the pre-approval and kind of see where they're going to land, set them up in MLS, get them out there searching for things. do showings and all that. But I think that one of the things that I've noticed has helped a lot is I try to keep my communication with the listing agent as open as possible. Even if it's just feedback that they just don't want to move forward to the house.
Yeah.
Sometimes that listing agent remembers that. And if it could be a completely different buyer, but like, as long as I'm trying to make a connection with them and just trying to be as honest and open with them as to what my buyer's feedback is. And when it comes to submitting an offer, making sure that they know that I've submitted the offer, asking the appropriate questions to be able to somewhat guide my buyer along with what we think we should offer.
Exactly. I mean, if I'm a listing agent and I'm getting that kind of communication and I'm not getting it from somebody else and the offers are really close, right? I may go to the tie goes to the runner and you're the runner in that situation. Or maybe we need a backup offer because something happened to that buyer that was trying to purchase, right? And now you're the first person on deck because they remembered that communication to take, those are the little things that make a big difference for sure. Having the right agent working for you.
No, I think that's definitely true. And I do that because I also appreciate that when I'm on the listing side.
Yeah.
So I know exactly. And I'm
yeah.
like, oh my God, they were a great buyer to work, buyer's agent to work with. They really stepped up. It wasn't just like here's the offer and see you at the closing table. So I also try to be that type of agent when I'm representing a buyer as well, because I know what I'm looking for in that process. And
it's amazing. The hardest thing and easiest thing is communication, right? And being transparent and talking. And that's it. A lot of people hide behind emails and texts. We welcome those phone calls. We welcome that conversation because sometimes during conversation, I feel it's more, these questions come up that wouldn't in a text chain.
Oh, absolutely.
And it just kind of elaborates on something, or coming from real experience. Maybe there's a young family, so I'm just giving them advice. Well, this is what we did, or I had to deal with these expenses that were not expected, when they're coming up with a budget, right? There's different things that are kind of down the pipe that you might see, or you remember from a past borrower that you were working with, or client, family, whoever it might be.
Right. And just responding in a text or an email, you're not putting that, light bulbs don't go off to be like, oh, actually, I'm thinking this. I don't know how many times I say to my clients, just bear with me. I'm talking out loud right now. Like I know you're asking me this and I'm trying to work through this and I am just thinking of all the different possibilities. And
exactly.
And that's how I generally get to, fortunately, mostly a great outcome. So,
and a lot of these first time home buyers, their parents are sometimes involved. They might be the ones giving the gift.
For better
they
or
might
worse,
be
they are,
giving advice or anything like that, right? They might be walking around this home inspection. We have experience doing that on both ends, right? You have experience dealing with that as well. And they're only looking out for the best of their child, right? So as long as they know we're all on the same page trying to do that, I've been on many calls, Zoom calls, face-to-face, anything what it might be. And that parent is on the other line asking questions because they've obviously gone through this experience, or they're the ones ponying up the down payment.
Right.
And they want to make sure that everything makes sense.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Protect themselves.
So
protect
that's okay.
Their children.
It's okay if you're first time home buyer and that's the case.
I've had
it's
plenty of home inspections where it started where I was like the salesman bad guy and like, oh, this isn't even for them. I don't know why they're considering it. And by the end of it, it's like, they see how they excited that their kids are or family members are. And I try to make sure that they know that, I'm not going to guide them in the wrong direction. I'm here to, I don't want a bad review. I work off of referrals. What is it going to do me to screw someone else over,
Well, exactly. And you build a relationship with these people. You care about them moving forward, Right. This might be their first home, and then in 5 to 10 years, they're like, hey, look, we have a second kid potentially coming, or we're expanding our family, and we need to go to the next one. And you're the first person they're thinking of because of that good experience, right? That's really how we all work at the end of the day. Absolutely. And that's being local, right? Yep. That's right. You might come across them at the grocery store,
right? Yeah. Very true.
Right. No, but it's fun building those relationships for sure. Yeah. With all this discussion on first time home buyers, we've had the ability to do a couple seminars ourselves together, right? And we got great turnouts, great questions, great conversation with that. Yep. And we were actually fortunate enough to video one of them as well. So if people do in fact want to see that or click the link, you could definitely click that link. And that'll allow them to actually see that seminar. And we'll be continuing to put these on together.
Check our Facebook page. We always have our invites out there, and absolutely. That's.
And then if anyone's ever looking for more data or information in regards to the company I'm working for and Jon Libman themselves and our team, you can actually go to localmortgageteam.com.
Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Thank you, Jon, for being here with us. Had a lot of great information for us. If you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to myself at 508-409-7777 or over to Jon.
Yeah, thanks again for tuning in. Thanks for having me. Our website is actually localmortgageteam.com, as well as my phone number is 508-212-5616.